Week 15 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units I located off the wire this week. The first one, the Indianapolis Colts. So this Colt defense, I know they give up a lot of points to their opposing teams, but they still go out there and put up some decent points on the board for fantasy owners. Week 10 in New England, 6 points allowed, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions. Week 12 versus Tampa Bay Bucks, 20 points allowed, 6 sacks, an INT, a fumble recovery. And Week 13 at Tennessee, 26 points allowed, 6 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, a touchdown, a block kick. In Week 14 at the Bengals, 34 points allowed with a pick 6. So Week 15, a good matchup as a streaming option versus the Steelers, where we know the Steelers offense really can't move the football. And even the Patriots, who've been one of the worst teams in the league this season, went in there and beat that Steelers team. So right now with Mitchell Trubisky most likely a quarterback once again, and we know he turns the football over. This Indianapolis Colts team available in 58% of fantasy leagues. The next DST is a streaming option this week, as well as the Atlanta Falcons. So this Falcon defense, they got off to a good start early in the season, and then as a streaming option versus mediocre offenses, they actually have gone out there and been decent. Week 12 versus the Saints, 15 points allowed, a sack, a pick 6, a fumble recovery. Week 13 at the Jets, 6 points allowed, 4 sacks, an interception, 2 fumble recoveries. And then Week 14, it was a down game and a tough loss versus Tampa Bay, 27 points allowed versus the Bucks in a sack. But Week 15, a great matchup at the 1-12 Panthers. Give up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And right now, this Panther team, they've had trouble all season moving the football. Going back to Week 1, this Atlanta defense had a great outing versus them. 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs, and a fumble recovery. So this week is a streaming option and a defense that can make trouble for Bryce Young and the Panthers, who really don't have playmakers besides Thielen and Chuba Hubbard. They are available 68% of fantasy leagues. Next DST is the Chicago Bears. So this Bear defense, ever since they went out there and traded for Montez Sweat, they've been putting up some fantasy points, believe it or not, over the last 3 weeks. Week 11 at Detroit, 29 points allowed, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery. Week 12 at the Vikings, 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, 4 interceptions. And then Week 14, what a game it was for them, 13 points allowed versus the Lions, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery in that one. So a good matchup as well at the Browns. I know Joe Flacco's in there, quarterback. He's been playing well the last 2 weeks since they inserted him into the starting lineup, but they do give up the 7th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So I know if you want to take a deep dart throw at the DST position with this bad DST, since they've gone out there and made plays over the last few weeks, they're out there in 96% of fantasy leagues. The next DST is the Los Angeles Chargers. So this Charger team, season just about over unless they run the table and get a lot of help. But their DST this season has come through in good matchups as a streaming option. So Week 15, a great matchup at the Raiders that give up the 9th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And we saw this Raider team just get shut out by the Minnesota Vikings in Week 14. So in their last streaming option type of game, Week 13 at the Patriots, no points given up, 5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. So Week 15, I think they could go into Vegas, make some plays. Khalil Mack, still an elite pass rusher going out there, getting to the quarterback. I know both teams, they struggle in this season, but I think this DST is a streaming option. Once again, could come through for fantasy owners, and they're available in 69% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final DST I looked at off the wire is the Cincinnati Bengals. So this Bengal DST, I know the numbers haven't been great this season, but they're a streaming option as well versus the Minnesota Vikings. For all we know, Mullins could be the starting quarterback this week after Joshua Dobbs was pulled in the 4th quarter for Mullins. So Week 14, they actually had a good outing, though, was this Bengal team. 8 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So the Vikings only scored 3 points at the Vegas Raiders, even though they won that game. One of the worst games you'll see all season. And they do give up the 11th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So if you need a streaming option, Cincinnati's available in 75% of fantasy leagues. That's a few defense DST units I looked at off the wire for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.